Sounds good. All right. So we're live
Yep.
recording. Cool. Well, yeah, I'm glad to see you again. We had a great chat with Shari, and it's unfortunate she couldn't make it. I hope she's doing well, and what she's got going on, I pray everything goes well. So we're
Amen.
here to talk about the hierarchy of heaven and earth. But as we were talking before, maybe we can get to know each other a little bit better here, and save kind of the juicy parts of the book for when Shari joins us. That sound good?
That sounds great, James.
Good deal. Well, so we're reading here the hierarchy of heaven and earth, right, with an introduction by C.S. Lewis. Um, I guess start from the beginning. What brought you to this book? Take us like kind of. I guess first let's start out. Where are you from?
I'm originally from a little town. Well, it's not. I guess I've known enough Midwesterners now that I don't that I know I probably shouldn't say little town, but
Mm-hmm.
certainly by my perspective, what seems like a little town, uh, it's about 16,000 people. So it's
Mm-hmm.
like a small city, little town. To me, it's a little town, small place.
Yeah. Right. It's relative, right?
It's near the coast. It's called Aberdeen. Probably it's more famous than most small cities because of Nirvana, because
Mm-hmm.
that's where
Okay.
Nirvana's from.
Gotcha.
Uh,
Yeah.
but
I was gonna wear my Nirvana T-shirt. Actually, that's funny. I have a little Nirvana throwback. I was like, I'm gonna stick with my gear, just relaxing gear, man. I have what I have on here. So, you're from the Seattle area?
Aberdeen is about 2 hours from Seattle.
Okay,
Yeah, it's southwest of Seattle.
okay.
Seattle's
Is
further north.
suburb?
No, it's not a suburb. It's quite it's actually two county. There's actually an entire county that separate. So like
Okay.
Seattle is in the Puget Sound area, and then if you go southwest from the Puget Sound toward the coast, so Aberdeen is actually closer to the actual coast of Washington. So Seattle, like it's not actually on the ocean. It's in a sound, which is kind of like it's an inlet. It's kind of
Mm-hmm.
almost like we call it a sound, but like if it were in Scandinavia, it'd be called a fjord. Right.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, it's not really like, but the town I'm from is at the mouth of the Chehalis River, like
Mm-hmm.
like near where the River empties into the ocean. So
Okay.
the town I'm from is only actually like about 18 or 19 miles from the actual coast.
Okay. Were you born
So
and raised there?
I was born and raised there.
Okay. Your family from that area too?
So my mom uh, and both of my grandmothers are from Alabama.
Okay. Alabama.
And My mom moved to Washington as a teenager, and um, I my grandmother ended up moving to Washington later in life, but most of my life she was still in Alabama. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, she would come to visit, and that's my mom's mom, and
Okay.
then um, my dad's mom, she they moved from San they well they moved for she moved from Alabama to California to San Francisco. That's where
Mm-hmm.
her and my grandfather uh, lived for, like, my grandfather was a chef in San Francisco for 35 years.
Okay.
And then toward the end of his career, he took a job as the chef for the Ocean Shores Inn when it was first being built,
Mm-hmm.
because they were kind of like, they were really kind of, they sold it to him as that it was going to be like a five-star establishment. So he was like, he left San Francisco to go take a job at the Ocean Shores Inn, and that was in like the 60s, the early
Okay.
60s.
Okay.
So my grandparents had been in Western Washington from like the 60s going forward, and he was
Okay.
originally from Oklahoma.
Oh, from Oklahoma.
Yeah.
Okay.
So I don't
Do you?
have my
Yeah.
family doesn't have deep roots in Washington State.
But so you have
So
some deep
it's
roots
like,
in Alabama, though.
yeah. Yes. I have a big my grandmother on my dad's side was from Huntsville. My
Mm-hmm.
mom was from Coleman County. But they moved to Birmingham uh, at some point, like later in her childhood. So she was born in Coleman County, and then they moved to Birmingham because her dad got a job in a steel mill.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Do you ever visit Alabama? You still have kind of
You
family
know,
there?
My son and my daughter have both been, but I've actually never gone. I
Wow.
was gonna go. I was thinking about going last summer, but I just wasn't able to take the time off of work.
Yeah. Okay.
So I'm gonna go one of these days with my mom to one of the family reunions for sure.
Yeah. Okay.
I've never
What
been
do
to
you?
Oklahoma. I've never been to Oklahoma either, which where my grandfather was. And I'm wearing a Sooners jersey today too. I've worked for the
Okay.
Sooners my whole life, and I've never been to the state of Oklahoma.
Okay. All right. What Yeah, I got a Gators jersey on or a
There you
shirt
go.
on here. We actually play sometimes.
Yeah,
When
yeah. I won't remind you of the last game.
I don't know what you're talking about.
You guys are missing a bunch of starters, so it's okay.
Let's just move on. Let's just move on.
Yeah.
What do you do for work?
I work in public disclosure.
Hmm.
Yeah.
That's
It's okay if you don't know what that is. Almost nobody does.
sounds like you're like working with kind of UFO secrets to me, actually.
Well, maybe if I might get those kinds of requests if I were doing FOIA requests for the federal government,
Mm-hmm.
and working for like the FBI or the CIA or something like that. But no,
Mm-hmm.
I work for the state of I do public disclosure for the state of Washington
Mm-hmm.
for an agency that is a mental health agency.
Okay.
But that is, you kind of got the general idea though. It is public
Yeah.
records requests that I process.
Okay. In terms of court situations or legal.
For mine, yeah. Part of my agency deals with forensic mental health evaluations. So
Mm-hmm.
I get requests for those. Although the one of the guy I supervise does processes most of those requests.
Mm-hmm.
Most of what I actually handle most of the administrative type of stuff and all the big email searches and stuff like that.
Okay.
Which is
How
why
long?
I'm able to, which is how I'm able to listen to so many videos on the internet because while I'm
Right.
reviewing email, I can always just have something going in the background.
Yeah, it's funny how I have my little earpiece, like my little earpiece in all the time. So like on drives or at lunch or just when I'm doing tasks like that as well, I'll have it in. It's you kind of find there's so much to absorb.
Right.
It's like you got to find that time when you can.
Hmm.
How long have you been doing that type of work?
So I'm on my like about third career. So
Okay.
I've been doing it since 2015.
Hmm. Okay.
Yeah.
And what'd you do before that?
I managed a computer retail store.
Hmm.
And then before that, I managed cell phone stores. So like
Okay.
kind of like tech sales management was my career prior to doing public disclosure.
Okay.
So
And what did you do before that? You said that
before
was your
that,
third
before that, I was in the culinary field. I was a chef.
culinary. Okay.
Yep.
So you
Yep.
you followed in your grandpa's footsteps.
I did, and yeah, that's exactly it. I followed in my
Yeah.
grandpa's footsteps. I did that for a number of years, and I never intended to.
Hmm.
I worked as a line cook when I was in college,
Okay.
and I studied great books mostly in my
Hmm.
academic background. And then as I got closer to graduation, I'm like, I need a major that I might be able to actually get a job with,
Right.
right?
Yeah. I had the same experience and just some residences there. So my family, immigrated from Greece and my parents owned restaurants my whole life. And my dad is a cook now. My mom, cooks at her restaurant. So, but my dad told me, I remember this clearly. He says, Jimmy, he calls me Jimmy in a Greek accent. Jimmy, I wouldn't tell my worst enemy to get in the restaurant business. Not my worst enemy.
Yeah.
I'm like,
Yeah.
okay, that kind of stuck
Yeah.
with me.
Yeah. Yeah. No, yeah, I
Difficult.
understand. I understand that. I mean, it's a tough business. It's a very
Yeah.
tough business. My grandfather actually, after the Ocean Shores End thing, he actually had a steakhouse that was like a high-end steakhouse that he started with a business partner.
Hmm.
That was it failed miserably. It just wasn't where he opened it in Hoquiam, Washington,
Hmm.
which is right near Aberdeen, and
Hmm.
there wasn't enough money
Yeah.
to support the business model, and the location wasn't very good.
Yeah.
But yeah,
I think 80% of small restaurants fail, in the first three
yeah,
years. So it's a really tough, grueling business. And even if you make it, it seems like glamorous. But if you're opening a business, you're working at least 80 hours a week.
yeah.
And it's hard work
And
with
it's
your,
physical work, and
yeah,
it's a physical job. It is not. I
yeah,
mean, it is a very physical job.
yeah.
Yeah, my uncle Ted had a pancake house. Like so, my grandfather's brothers, they were all all of them were cooks. Like that was the so it's like there's a long history of that being kind of like the family thing. So what
Mm-hmm.
it's not that surprising that I ended up doing it at least for a time.
Yeah.
But my uncle Ted, his pancake house actually was like successful, but he had a Smitty's franchise. He didn't do
Mm-hmm.
anything high. Took a much lower risk. Like
Mm-hmm.
my grandfather was actually like a chef, and he had this vision of what he wanted,
Yeah.
and like tried to make it happen. Whereas my uncle Ted, who really was he was just a short order cook, really.
Mm-hmm.
He took a safe, Smitty's franchise route, and his franchise was comparatively successful.
Yeah.
Although he was in Westport, which is actually on the coast. So the thing with Westport is like the business is super seasonal.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like you have to really be a good manager of money because you're
Mm-hmm.
making most of your revenue for the year is coming in that just in that summer season, and
Yeah.
that's got to carry you through the dead winter season.
Yeah. My dad had restaurants in the shore of Jersey Shore, and it was just
Yeah.
seasonal. Just and I
Yep.
remember 15 years old, I would go and help him, and we'd have 4 months where it was just mayhem. And then you'd have to kind of manage your money well to kind of get through. And it was always a tough slog, I remember, but it was fun kind of working in that space. And it's funny, I was just talking with a friend today at lunch about how immigrants from Greece and even Italy, right? They get into the restaurant business, right? And what is the restaurant business? It's about breaking bread, right? Eating food. So it's easier to enculturate yourself into a culture if you get into the restaurant business, right? Because you're actually serving people food, and you're giving them something. You're giving a community. You're giving them a community, right? And you're given an opportunity to commune, which most communities don't have any real way of doing that. So it's kind of like the American way communities are built, which is now
Yeah.
kind of receding quickly in front of us, which is
Yeah.
really unfortunate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Because more and more chains, right? Yeah, I know.
Yeah.
And I love small restaurants, and it's like that's where I spend my money at small restaurants like whenever I can. I hate eating. I hate dining at chain restaurants.
Mm-hmm.
It's funny that the my grandfather's pancake house, the restaurant that came in after he retired and sold, the restaurant that came in was actually a really nice Greek restaurant
Mm-hmm.
called Constantine's.
Mm-hmm.
So
Yeah.
yeah, actually I ate at the restaurant that came in where my uncle's pancake house had been several times.
Yeah. Yeah. Very cool. Very
Yeah.
cool. So you grew up in Aberdeen there. What was it
Yeah.
like growing up there as a kid, and what were your parents like?
Sure. Okay. So Aberdeen, by the time I was growing up, Aberdeen like was already heading into like decay and economic depression
Mm-hmm.
because it was a timber industry town.
Mm-hmm.
And as I was growing up, pulp mills were closing every couple of years. We would lose a pulp mill. I don't know if there are any pulp mills left anymore at all.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But they were kind of like beginning to close, and like there were less and less jobs in the logging industry, and there was less and less opportunity. So it was very economically depressed. My parents, my dad left my mom shortly after finishing nursing school, um, and told her that he was gay.
Mm-hmm.
So
Your dad was a
um,
nurse?
my dad was a nurse. Both my
Okay.
parents are nurses.
Okay. Oh, cool.
My mom didn't go to nursing school. My mom was a waitress when I was young, though.
Mm-hmm.
She was working as a waitress, and in fact, she was working as a waitress. One of the restaurants she worked with, my uncle Dave, another one of my grandfather's brothers, was actually like the head cook at one of the restaurants she worked at.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, but
So how old were you when that happened? When your dad left your mom?
5 years old.
Wow.
5 years
Do
old.
you have any memories of that?
Yeah, I actually do. I can remember my dad driving me to Westport because that's where my grandparents were living at the time. I ended up spending a lot of my childhood with my grandparents because of this.
Yeah.
So when I was 5 years old, my mom was basically having a nervous breakdown. Like after,
Mm-hmm.
not basically, she was
Mm-hmm.
having a nervous breakdown because it was a crushing blow. to hear
Yeah.
that, right? Because
Of course.
they were like they were like, evangelical Christians who had like this strong faith, and like everybody looked at them as like this model family. And like, they like when I was a baby, like they saved up to go to see Derek Prince in Vancouver,
Mm-hmm.
British Columbia, which was it's a pretty big drive from Aberdeen.
Yeah.
That's not, and so and everybody loved my dad. My dad was like very charismatic, very well liked. Um, we had moved from I was born in Aberdeen Hoquiam area, and then we moved to Longview, which is near the further south, near the Columbia River, like toward the Oregon border.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where he went to Lower Columbia College
Mm-hmm.
in Longview for his nursing school.
Okay.
And then, but anyway, in terms of like my memory of like the actual, this is the thing I remember. Well, I remember two things. First, I remember like coming into the kitchen and seeing my mom on the floor crying.
Mm-hmm.
And then I remember my dad driving me to his parents' house, and I think it was just me and my dad in the
Mm-hmm.
car. That's my memory of it is. And I can actually remember driving through downtown Westport
Mm-hmm.
and him trying to explain to me what was going on. And he's like, well, he's like, you see, your dad just likes boys more than girls. And my
Mm-hmm.
response was, so do I. Why does
Right.
that
Yeah.
matter?
Yeah. At that age, it's like,
Yeah,
well, doesn't
right. It's like
everybody, you
so
know?
I had no idea what he was saying to me. It's
Yeah.
like duh.
Yeah.
So and then and so I lived with my grandparents for a number of years.
Is that your
Um,
dad's parents?
yeah,
Your dad's
my
parents.
dad's
Okay.
parents. Yeah, because my mom's parents were still in Alabama.
Mm-hmm. Now,
Well,
were your grandparents, were they religious people? What were they like?
no, well, okay, so here's the thing. My grandmother was kind of like spiritual but not religious type, you
Mm-hmm.
know. She loved watching like Touched by an Angel, all that kind of stuff, Highway to Heaven. So
Mm-hmm.
it's sort of like vaguely spiritual, certainly believed in God, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she had been raised Christian Scientist,
Mm-hmm.
and she was always suspicious of doctors. So that's part of that stuck with her, right? Because she was always reluctant to go to the doctor, always suspicious of doctors. But
Mm-hmm.
she had not stayed within that tradition. Closer to like she started going to her best friend's Baptist church closer to the end of her life a little bit because
Mm-hmm.
she had this vision of Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
But for most of the time I was growing up, we didn't go to church ever.
Mm-hmm.
Like for me, it's like the thing I look forward to on Sunday mornings was not church. It was the NFL Today.
Mm-hmm.
Okay,
Yeah.
because my grandfather was a huge sports fan. That was like my grandfather was like basically my best friend in addition to my grandfather. It's like
Yeah.
we did everything together. He took me to all my sports practices. We watched games together.
Yeah.
He was my hero. I loved my grandfather. He
Yeah.
was not religious at all. And he was he was a rough around the edges Okie
Mm-hmm.
who came from like working in kitchens. And you
Mm-hmm.
sounds like you've been in professional kitchens a bit yourself, so you know what people talk like in professional kitchens.
Absolutely.
It's not
Yeah.
generally it's not generally the kind of
Yeah.
language that's like family friendly.
Right.
So
Yeah.
like right. So like yeah, so blasphemies were almost punctuation sometimes.
Yeah. Of course. Of
The odd
course.
thing about my grandfather though is like despite all of that, my grandfather actually had polio when he was a kid.
Mm. Okay.
So he walked with a limp and he had one leg that was withered from the polio.
Mm-hmm.
And the one thing he always had favorable things to say about Catholics
Hmm.
because he had been cared for in a Catholic hospital in Oklahoma. He's from Midwest City, Oklahoma, which is like a suburb of Oklahoma City.
Mm-hmm.
And he had been cared for in a Catholic hospital as a child, and he just thought that the way that the nuns in the hospital treated him was just like.
Hmm.
And
Stuck
my
with him.
grandfather was also he was a super kind, super generous person.
Mm-hmm.
Like he would like, and he particularly had a soft spot for like people for like cooks who were struggling with drug and alcohol addiction. Like
Right.
he would go and take like guys who guys who he'd met at the mission who were cooks, and like he'd bring them home. He'd have
Yeah.
coffee with them. He would like try to help them get their shit together and get a
Yeah.
steady job. And
That
yeah,
was
so he
most of
was.
them, right? In that industry, a lot of
Yeah,
them,
right, exactly, which is not common, but he was doing stuff like that all the time. So he
yeah,
he
yeah,
had he had he had a big heart.
yeah. Wow.
Yeah. So
It's interesting that you say he's not religious, but I mean, football is America's religion almost. Very
yeah,
ritualistic.
yeah.
You have the transcendent raising of the trophy. There's very a lot of yeah, that's essentially America's secular religion in a sense. As I have the same kind of memories and whatnot, and I have a similar memory. And I think this story of having a divorce early on is so common in so many Americans' lives. I had a very vivid memory. I must have been 7 years old, and my parents would fight a lot. And I remember they had this big fight, and I'm just sitting there closing my ears in bed, and my dad comes to me, and I'm pretending I'm sleeping, and he says, "Jimmy," he says, your mom doesn't want me anymore. Your mom doesn't want me anymore. I'm going to grandma and grandpa's." And it's just, I don't remember anything
Oh
before that or
man.
really after that. And that thing, that hurt me so much. Where till about, I mean, maybe 15 years ago, when I told that story, even as an adult, late an adult, tears would come up out of nowhere. And I'm like, just, it was such a profound hurt. And my parents were like that, like the, ideal, you know, ideal couple, great kids, and it's very Greek family. So a divorce is a big deal.
Mm,
Right. And
right.
that for some reason, that was such a big concern of me as a young kid that my parents would get divorced. Like I remember I would make my mom promise, and she would promise me and whatnot. So this very, conventional norm of divorce in American lives, it's so normal that people just kind of accept it, or, it's a very big part of why things are the way that they are, and
Yes.
why mental health issues are ubiquitous. That's a big part of it. And I think it's just because it's so normed now that it gets kind of glossed over. But so kind of back to so growing up with your parents, going to school in middle school and high school, I mean, your grandparents, were you into schoolwork? Were you into the educational system?
Yeah, I was always a good student.
Mm-hmm.
I went through a phase. Okay, so I moved back with my mom for junior high,
Mm-hmm.
and then I was back with my parents by or my, with my grand I was back with my grandparents by my sophomore year of high school, maybe my freshman year of high school. I went back with my mom for a couple years, and then like some stuff happened with my stepdad and my sister that
Mm-hmm.
I just decided to go back with my grandparents
Yeah.
after that. I love my mom. My mom is a wonderful person, and she's a beautiful Christian woman, and I love
Mm-hmm.
her. I'm not saying anything bad about my mom. She
Sure.
had a hard go of it. Like
Mm-hmm.
she's had a hard life.
Of course.
But the decision I made at the time was to go back with my grandparents because it just felt like a more stable environment for me.
Yeah.
So but so other than this brief period in junior high where my grades suffered for a little bit, but I was still captain of the Knowledge Bowl team.
Mm-hmm.
And it's not like I suddenly got stupid or anything.
Yeah.
I just got really sick of I just got tired of like having to do the homework when I didn't need to do the homework.
Mm-hmm.
So it's like
Yeah.
I had bad grades even though like I got an A on every test I ever took,
Yeah. Yeah.
even in junior high. But my grades were bad because I stopped wanting to do homework.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So in high school, I still kind of didn't like the homework thing, but it's like I realized I needed to get into college, so it's like I had to like do enough of the homework so that my GPA didn't drop too low. So I
Mm-hmm.
had like my GPA in high school was like 3.6 or something like that.
Okay.
So but like I still got like some of my friends though would still harass me. Like I can remember there was this okay, the girl who actually ended up being our valedictorian,
Mm-hmm.
who was in speech and debate with me. Sun Men was her name.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, she harassed me nonstop. She would just not get off my back. She would be
Mm-hmm.
like, you should be the valedictorian. Like,
Hmm.
how are your grades this? I'm like, I have a 3.5, 3.6. What's wrong with that? It's just like, there's no way that your GPA should be that low.
Yeah.
So she was
Yeah.
like, harass me.
So were you were kind of a nerdy, smart kid, but popular?
I was okay. That this is weird. I was both simultaneously popular and unpopular,
Mm-hmm.
and it was and a little bit infamous. So it depends on like I generated strong reactions.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So like I was a bit of like I was kind of a bit of a folk hero to some because I
Mm-hmm.
had this tendency to fight against administration and
Mm-hmm.
win.
Mm-hmm.
So I kind of had this like almost like Ferris Bueller kind of reputation,
Right.
which made me very popular with certain types of people, but not very
Yeah.
popular with other types of people. And
Mm-hmm.
most of the popular girls in my school hated me.
Mm-hmm.
They hated me because I would say like controversial things that were kind of critical of a lot of the things that they thought.
Mm-hmm.
Because I never shied away from like I never shied away from controversy. In fact, I got kicked out of my sophomore honors biology class
Mm-hmm.
uh, one time where like my instructor and I had like my grade in that class was like over 100%
Mm-hmm.
because of extra credit.
Yeah.
But he got so mad at me one time. He said Nathan, you would stir shit just to make it stink more, and like get out of my class. And
Yeah.
sent me to the and he sent me to the vice principal's office. So
So
yeah.
would you say that your high school experience was a positive one, a negative one, or kind of a little bit of both?
It was a mixed bag. It was but I mean probably more positive than negative. Like I did really well in speech and debate. We finished tie. We finished in a third place tie for Knowledge Bowl championships at state. I I so and I was more people liked me than didn't like me. It's just like the people that didn't like me were here. Okay, the downside was this: the people that didn't like me were the people that kept me from getting invited to parties.
Mm-hmm.
Because even my friends, it's like they wanted those girls there. So if
Mm-hmm.
I was so if those girls told them like I'm not coming to this party if you invite Nate.
Yeah.
Actually, everybody called me Nathan at that time. If you invite Nathan, I'm not gonna. It's like
Yeah.
yeah. So like there was one time I was calling up my best friend. I'm calling up my best friend because we're supposed to be playing D&D, right?
Mm-hmm.
So
Mm-hmm.
we're supposed to be having our D&D game. I call him up on a Saturday night. And it's like, hey, what's up? Like, and he never did answer his phone.
Mm-hmm.
Finally, his brother answers his younger brother Norman, who I was also friends with, answers the phone. And he's like, "Yeah." He's like, "I'm really sorry, Nathan." He's like, "But there's a party here with girls, and they were told that you were that if you came, none of the girls were coming." So it's like,
So you were the gadfly of the group, huh? You were the
so
gadfly of the group. Awesome.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Was there a lot of partying and drugging in your school that you remember?
In my school,
Yeah.
there was like, I mean, there was a fair amount of that. I mean, we had we had like, you know, the smoker shed where all the stoners. That wasn't my. I mean, like my friends in high school, it's like, uh, you know, my best friend, he actually like dropped out of law school, but he became like a top flight salesperson and did fine
Mm-hmm.
for himself as a law school dropout.
Mm-hmm.
He was never very disciplined, so I'm not surprised that he did something like that, where it's like,
Yeah.
you know, he didn't finish I mean he didn't finish the professional degree, but you know, landed
Yeah.
into something else where he could use his charisma, you know,
Yeah.
and his intelligence in a productive fashion. And
Yeah.
then like my buddy RJ is like he actually like he does like he's his I think his graduate degree is in zoology, I think, but
Mm-hmm.
he actually teaches at like a medical school, and
Mm-hmm.
his special is geriatrics, like
Mm-hmm.
processes of aging, and he's done a
Okay.
bunch of research on like on flies,
Hmm.
because apparently like flies contain some possible secret to like potentially reversing aging processes in humans.
Mm.
So like
Like the
that's
whole
the research that he does.
sinensis,
He
the
sent me
whole.
white papers of his stuff, and it's like I'm a pretty smart guy, but it's like
Yeah.
I don't have the science background, like
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
that to understand that level of stuff.
Yeah.
And then like my friend Brian, he's a PhD in cognitive psychology, and like so basically everybody I was friends with, they all like They all went to graduate school. They were all really smart, and none of them really did any of that kind of stuff. Like we might occasionally like, have a couple of beers or something, but that's about it.
Are some of your buddies still around? Did a lot of them leave town
The only one I'm still in contact with is Narcissus.
Mm-hmm,
He lives in LA.
mm-hmm,
He's the one who went into sales. I think he works for like in sales for an IT company now. He did
mm-hmm.
his both of his parents were doctors. So like I think after he dropped out of law school, his like mom hooked him up with a pharmaceutical sales gig for a while.
Okay.
He ended up like he's more, I mean, he's nerdy, so he ended
Mm-hmm.
up transitioning into more IT related sales.
Okay.
So,
What was
um,
what was Nate's relationship with God in high school?
so I was like, so my
Or
religion,
Nathan's, sorry. Back then it was
Nathan,
Nathan,
yeah,
right?
well, I was
Okay.
still Nathan. Then you call me
Yeah.
Nate. I mean,
Well, I'm just gonna make
yeah,
it period specific, you know.
yeah, period specific. Okay, so Nathan. So in my childhood, the religious exposure I had was through when I lived with my mom. I attended her Pentecostal church. So,
Mm-hmm.
and like my parents were, evangelical charismatic types when I was very, very young. And then I also went to my grandmother's best friend, Jean Timmons. She was like kind of like the church lady of the Southern Baptist Church in our town. Like that, she was the beating heart of that church. She's what kept that church going.
Mm-hmm.
And I attended her church on several occasions.
Mm-hmm.
But and when I was very, very young, I was very preachy. Like
Mm-hmm.
I would preach at my grandparents like all the time, just kind of like parroting what I heard from my parents, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like a little mini tiny apologist.
Mm-hmm. So would you
Um,
preach about religious concepts or ideas
yeah,
or
yeah, yeah, yeah. I would just try to convince them to believe, because they weren't going to church, and my
yeah.
granny would get really mad at me because I was so like, I mean, just not really mad at me, but
Yeah.
she'd be just like, okay, knock it off. And then I would tease them about politics too. This is funny. This actually shows an interesting historical change.
Mm-hmm.
So my parents, as evangelicals, like in the mid '70s, they voted for Carter because
Mm-hmm.
that's what evangelicals did in 1976. So I can remember going and teasing my grandfather about the fact that Ford, because my grandfather did not vote for a Democratic candidate until he hated Reagan. So
Mm-hmm.
1980 was the first year he voted Democrat.
Oh wow.
So
Okay.
yeah, yeah.
Now, it's funny that you mentioned that. The last three people I talked to, and they told me that they were very interested in God and religious ideas as a very small child. And my wife was very interested in the Bible as a very small child. And my 6-year-old is very interested in these ideas. At last, half dozen people, when this came about, they all said, you know what? But just like you said, when I was really little, I was really interested in this. And then every single one of them that kind of fell away. Right. And it's this idea of follow the babes. Right. And it's an interesting thing that, it's just been popping up the last month or so. So what was did you have intellectual curiosity about God in high school?
Well, yeah. Okay. Let me just. I never stopped reading the Bible,
Okay.
even when I stopped believing, and I never lost my interest in theology, and I never became an atheist.
Mm-hmm.
By the time I was in high school, this was my view was as follows. My view was that atheists are stupid, and so are believers, and because they're both making claims that are untenable. Like you cannot claim the absolute certainty that you're claiming for your proposition, because that's what I thought. So this was my conception of faith, was that whatever you were claiming to believe in to have as a faith proposition, you had to I viewed that as something that you were claiming with absolute unassailable certainty,
Mm-hmm.
like that it was completely grounded, and there was no possible means of doubting it. So I had this very kind of legalistic sort of conception, almost kind of like guilt or innocence beyond a reasonable doubt kind of conception of faith.
So would you say agnostic is
I
right?
was agnostic, yes, and I was
Okay.
not only was I agnostic, I was obnoxiously agnostic, because I would
Hmm.
argue with atheists and I would argue with believers. And I mean, like I said, I was on the debate team and I was a
Hmm.
very good debater. So I would kind of like, I would play around with, I would play around with theistic arguments if I was
Hmm.
talking to an atheist,
Yeah.
just to, but that just, what that showed me, that didn't actually move the needle for me in terms of belief, because I just thought it was just like anything else. It's just like whoever has the strongest intellect and is the best arguer in the room is going to carry the day, and that it
Hmm.
doesn't really, and that it doesn't prove anything other than that person is smarter and can argue better.
It's a bit of a sophist, right? Sophistry, a little bit, huh?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I was an instinctive, intuitive postmodern,
Yeah.
like
Okay.
without ever having read any, without ever having read any postmodern philosophy. I was like, finite foundations, you can't
Yeah.
possibly know anything, shut up.
Yeah. Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah,
Very interesting. I was going to
yeah,
ask you, but what Nate would tell Nathan about this argument today. But let's actually move on a little bit to your
yeah, sure, sure,
to
sure.
your progression there. So from high school, you went to college.
Yeah, I did.
Where'd you go?
So I knew I wanted to study great books. This was the
Mhm.
thing that was a given. So I was
What do you
have
mean great books?
like I specifically had an interest in entering a great books program at a college that specializes in great books, meaning
Okay.
that I wanted to, because I'd never lost that interest in like the dialogue of the culture,
Mm-hmm.
and was still reading the Bible and was still reading theology and was still reading philosophy. I read a lot of philosophy in high school because I was a Lincoln Douglas debater, and like it's values debate, right? And in values
Mm-hmm.
debate, it always comes down to a philosophical conflict. So
So
I
like
was
political
reading
philosophy, like Locke and Hume
political
and yeah.
philosophy, moral philosophy. Yeah, I mean it's like like I mean Plato and Kant would come up in like literally every single debate. Like you
Okay.
couldn't. I mean, um, and Nietzsche pretty commonly too. But
Yeah.
so I read a
Okay.
lot of philosophy in high school, and I still, and I can't, like I said, I read the Bible all along, and I read theology all along.
What do you mean
Um,
by theology? Like what types of theological books would you read?
C.S. Lewis, I always loved C.S. Lewis.
So you
Like
got
even when I
into
didn't
them in
agree,
high
even when
school?
I wasn't convinced by him, I still, even when I wasn't convinced by him, I still read him.
But what would you say? What was your argument against his kind of perspective then? Like, what would it be?
It just came down to that fundamental, like, okay, that might be probabilistic.
Mm-hmm.
You can make a probabilistic claim, but it's nothing more than a probabilistic claim. It's like
Yeah.
there's no,
Yeah.
you can't, because I was still convinced that there had, I was still convinced that that was the standard, was absolute certainty.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Right. Okay. So that's just how I thought about it.
What do
So
you mean by absolute certainty? Like if unless you know something that's absolutely certain to be true, you can't say it's true. Is that what you mean? What do you,
correct.
okay.
Yeah.
How would you
Correct.
how would you measure that though? If how would you measure if something's absolutely certain? Because to measure it against
Right.
something, so not
Right.
not not to argue with
I had
Yeah,
no
Nate, not to
problem.
argue with Nathan.
No, I was, yeah,
you know
Nathan had the Nathan was a big fish in a small pond and hadn't met his match yet. And so
yeah.
that's what eventually this great books college thing is, this is the arc that will change that. Your son's
Okay.
adorable. Hey.
Yeah, thank you. Say hi.
Hey.
Yeah,
Hey buddy.
he can't hear us or anything. He says
That's all
hi.
right. Hey man.
um
Anyway,
so yeah, tell me more about, so where'd
so
you go to school?
okay, so I knew I wanted to go to a great books college, and I was deciding between going to St. John's,
Mm-hmm.
um, the Santa Fe campus of St. John's, um, or to just go to Evergreen, which was close to home, because Evergreen was offering a great books program the year that I was entering.
Wait, the Evergreen?
Yeah, that's right.
Wow. Okay.
Yep,
Very interesting.
yep, the Evergreen.
But it wasn't the Evergreen when you were considering going there, right?
It was well on its way.
Okay.
So when I entered and I chose Evergreen because it was like close to home, way cheaper. I'm still going to get to study great books. I won't get to learn Greek, but I can always learn Greek later.
Yeah.
That was
What wait, what year was this? What year?
89.
89. Okay.
Yeah, I graduated in 89. Fall of 89, I entered the Evergreen State College.
Okay.
and I'm studying great books at the Evergreen State College. And I realize pretty quickly. So, in terms of the political climate, Evergreen is very much on a closing course for what it became. And in '89, it was kind of like this was the like sort of the early stages of all the kind of thinking that we see that is like dominating the culture. And Evergreen was one of the places where that was like strongest,
So did they
even
have this?
even
They had
early
this
on.
unique teaching method, right? Where did they
Yes,
start that already?
yes, that's one of the reasons I chose it, and also
Okay.
St. John's too. Like
Yeah.
both schools were great books and Socratic method.
Okay. Which
Well,
is
that's
not a.
why, which
Yeah.
is
It's a.
what I knew I
Yeah.
wanted. I wanted
Yeah.
great books and Socratic method. It's like this is the education I want.
Hmm.
And it's like I didn't care about whether it was practical. I didn't care about, and I was paying for it. I was mostly paying for it myself because
Hmm.
so I didn't really care. That's why I was working in the summers as a line cook, right? Was to help pay my way through college. So I would just like work 60 hours a week during the summer
Hmm.
as a line cook and get, massive overtime. And then
Yeah.
that to help cover my expenses for whatever I wasn't able to cover through, through scholarship or grant.
And you did
I
4 years at Evergreen.
okay, eventually,
Okay.
but there is a detour.
Hmm.
So after my first year at Evergreen, like one of my professors is like actually was honest enough with me to like tell me like you don't belong here.
Yeah.
So he was like, you don't belong. He was very frank. He's like, you don't belong here. And he was like, you're too good for this place because he already could see it was falling to hell. He's actually the one who was responsible for there being a great books program.
Hmm.
He knew already that there was a time coming when that would be unthinkable to even offer at the college. He knew exactly where the college was headed. He
It wasn't Brett Weinstein, was it?
No, it
Just
wasn't Brett
kidding. Just
Weinstein.
kidding.
Richard Alexander. Richard
Okay.
Alexander was actually one of the founders of the college.
Oh wow.
Yeah, he's since passed away, but like he actually like he told me straight up. He's like, you really don't belong here. He told me I should transfer to. He thought I should transfer to Eastern.
Hmm.
Eastern Washington University is where he advised me to transfer. But like, no, I still want to study great books. So it's like I ended up I left Evergreen. I ended up taking a year off of college and just working and saving more money while I figured out where I wanted to go next. And I'm sitting in the library and I'm reading National Review because I'd like Evergreen turned me into. I was actually pretty progressive when I entered Evergreen,
Hmm.
but I was like a classical liberal kind of progressive, not like. And when I saw like what was already starting to happen at Evergreen, that like I'm like I don't want any part of this.
What did that
So
look like
what
then?
did it look like?
Yeah.
Multiculturalism.
Hmm.
Multiculturalism was the early, like it started with multiculturalism, but even multiculturalism, like that was enough to turn me off because it's like I still believe it may seem weird with my whole like agnostic doubt of suspicion of certainty kind of thing, but I
Hmm.
still felt that like but I had this kind of like Sam Harris kind of like faith in somehow there being an objective morality. So
Hmm.
multiculturalism like really rubbed me the wrong way. I did not like relativism at all.
Hmm. Okay.
Never liked
Sure.
relativism.
Hmm.
So I actually um so I like was taking some classes at a community college in the meantime while I'm trying to figure out where I'm going to transfer to finish my 4-year degree. And I was actually like writing op-eds for the community college paper, like talking about how what it how awful multiculturalism was and
Mm.
how we need to reestablish Common Core and Western Civ courses and all this.
Hmm.
This is just coming from a like by now I'm a full-fledged political neocon,
Okay.
but I'm not religious still.
Hmm.
Okay.
So you were
So
turned into a neocon at
by
Evergreen.
Evergreen. Yeah,
Okay.
Evergreen turned
Wow.
me into hard like National Review and American Spectator reading Rush Limbaugh, listening to
Yeah.
full-fledged neocon.
Wow. Yeah.
So
Interesting.
yeah, so it's just like whatever this is, I want the opposite of that. I'm kind of
So,
tend toward extremes. It's just kind of like
well, it
I'm
seems
that
like
way.
that ethos tends towards extreme. So you're either going to be, move to the left or move to the right because of that environment of kind of, you think it's multiculturalism in itself or the idea behind it that causes this move to the right and to the left.
Yes, I think so. I think that's
Yeah.
very true. I think that's very on point.
Yeah. What were your
So
critiques of multiculturalism? Like, what was your concern with it?
um, that it would lead to moral relativism. It would inescapably lead to moral relativism and cultural decay.
Okay.
That
Just
was
because you're
my
mixing in different cultures and the ethos of, of American culture would just disintegrate because of the influx of differentiation, different
even
views
though
like
I
that.
so even though I was dubious of the possibility of arriving at an absolute truth, I saw that I saw cutting off the possibility of the endeavor as
Mm-hmm.
cultural suicide. So
Okay.
I wanted to maintain the endeavor, the move toward the goal, even if I thought the goal was unattainable. I thought it was still a goal worth shooting for, right?
Mm-hmm.
So it's like that cognitive dissonance for sure, no doubt about it. But that's where I was at that time.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then I also kind of like I think by then it's like, okay, this is after I'd have my okay. Backtrack a little bit. I was by then not not really completely. I was more agnostic, leaning toward theism
Mm-hmm.
and being a bit of a perennialist.
Okay.
And the experience that the experience there I had the experience that I had that made me move in that direction was attending actually it was a Ukrainian Orthodox church
Mm.
on a field trip when I was at Evergreen. We were studying
Mm-hmm.
the tale of Igor's campaign, and one of our faculty in the program, Patricia Kravchik, was Orthodox. Um,
Mm-hmm.
and from the Ukraine. And so we went to her little Ukrainian Orthodox church that was in a small town a little bit further north.
Now, did you
Uh,
know what Orthodox was then?
no
Like,
idea,
no idea, right?
no
Yeah.
no clue, no clue. In fact, I did I was some of the theology I was reading I was reading a bunch of stuff that was outside the curriculum for my papers because Richard Alexander was kind of like he took a direct interest in me and like was kind of pushing me to like go beyond the reading that was in the course. And like so he was having me read some Jacques Ellul
Mm-hmm.
and Paul Tillich and some other stuff because I'd kind of like I came to Christian anarchism before I came to Christianity. It's
Okay.
like at Tolstoy, I was reading The Kingdom of God is Within You. So it's like I believe the gospel of Jesus before I believe the gospel about Jesus, and I thought that like in a way that that the gospel of Jesus was a perennial message. I didn't
So
think
he was
that
just an enlightened cat, just like the Buddha was, just like
right. And these were truths that were there to be discovered by anybody.
yeah,
Yeah, and
like
that
loud,
like
yeah.
there may not be an absolute rational foundation for them, but they can be intuited. I think is probably how I would have defended my position at that time.
Would you still
Um,
kind of hold that position at all?
what was that?
Would you still hold that position at all? That the truth is and can be intuited in these different disciplines, these different domains, religious, philosophical, even scientific.
Yes, so I wasn't wrong.
Mm-hmm.
It's just that it's not the. It wasn't that I was wrong. I just had an incomplete picture.
Yeah, yeah, exactly.
So it's not that I was wrong. It's not that I was wrong. I was just having. I was still piecing it together. You know,
Yeah.
I was young. I was reading a lot of stuff. I was doing my best to piece it together. Those were the pieces that I had access to at that time. But I definitely was like, okay, it's like it's more probable that there is a God, that there is not a God, and there is definitely like some experience of God that is real that people are feeling. So they're feeling something,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's not a nothing. And it seems to be more than just an emotional state to me. So there probably is a God.
So it was more like God is the center of a wheel and the different spokes or the different religions, right? and kind of the perennialist view,
Yeah,
right?
very
Yeah.
much so. Yeah, and I was reading Huxley too.
Uh-huh.
So I
Okay.
mean, yeah, for sure. So
Yeah.
yes, that definitely. I think I was actually reading Castaneda even at that point
Mm.
as well.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, which was probably the most evergreen thing about me
Yeah. Right.
is that I read
Wow.
Castaneda.
Carlos Castaneda, right?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Wow.
Yes.
That's fascinating, man.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So yeah, I was kind of I mean I am a bit of a hippie. I mean it's not like I had no business being at Evergreen, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So I see this ad in National Review for Thomas Aquinas College, which is a
Mm-hmm.
group books college in Southern California. Also, that where classes are conducted in the Socratic method,
Mm-hmm.
and so I decided to transfer there, and I transferred to Thomas Aquinas College, and it's like I was at Thomas Aquinas College for one semester. I did very well academically. I love the place. I would tell people to say their kids send their kids there. I have nothing bad to say about it, but I ended up not staying
Mm-hmm.
and going back to Washington for dumb young person reasons. Like it was a bad decision. I should have stayed. I should have finished the full 4 years at Thomas Aquinas College. One of my friends from Thomas Aquinas that I'm still in touch with, Jason Von Boom. He in one of my last conversations that I had with him, he was like, I was kind of talking to him about this whole like weird mixture of like conservative and hippie that
Mm.
and he's
Yeah.
like yeah he's like there's always been in the right there's always been this weird bohemian element in the right
Right.
that's always
Yeah.
been there and it's like yeah you're right good point
So it's like it seems like
anyway
the little bit of a San Francisco from your grandpa and the Alabama from your grandma was kind
yeah
of,
well my
you know.
grandpa's an Okie though he just was
Oh
I
yeah,
mean
yeah,
they
okay.
that's right so he was
Yeah, yeah.
my
Gotcha.
dad actually was born in San Francisco though
Oh, okay,
so
gotcha.
maybe from my dad I got the San
Right.
Francisco
It's bubbling up in you, and you're kind of
yeah
trying to make do
and
with
my
it.
dad's a Buddhist
Okay.
so
He was a
he's
Buddhist.
very
Is he still alive?
he's still alive yeah
Yeah,
he's
and
still
he's still a
alive.
Buddhist.
He's still a Buddhist. Yes,
What?
he's a Buddhist. He went from evangelical Christianity to I don't know if he was ever an atheist. Not really, like kind of like agnostic, but certainly like was living a lifestyle that was chaotic to say the
Mm-hmm.
least. But he's been at least for the last 20 years or so he's been a self-identified Buddhist.
Okay. Is he a
So
practicing Buddhist or kind of like
he's like a
California
He's
Buddhist?
a
Yeah.
California Buddhist, but he does. I
Okay.
mean, he does. I mean, he does. I mean, he reads Buddhist. He reads Buddhist books. He practices meditation, but
Mm-hmm.
it's like yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, he's a California Buddhist.
Yeah.
Is there really a possibility of an American really being
I don't know.
real
That's a good
Buddhist?
question. That's a good
I mean, I
question.
don't want to. I don't want to. I mean, I don't know. I mean, it doesn't seem. It seems improbable to me.
Yeah.
Which
It's yeah.
which actually leads right into the next part of my story. So, but
Mm-hmm.
that semester that I spent at Thomas Aquinas College, I ended up going back to Evergreen and finishing my degree there. Long story short, the way I dealt with it,
Degree
being
in.
back at the Evergreen environment was
Oh,
just
I
doing a
lost.
bunch of
There
individual
you go.
contracts. That's the other thing about. That's why I decided to do it. It's like I could just go back. This is great, but I miss my siblings, and I was kind of miss my siblings. I was kind of homesick and I miss my friends. So I'm gonna kind of like I love it here, but I'm just gonna go back to Evergreen, finish my degree up there, and just do a bunch of individual contracts and study whatever I want.
Mm-hmm. Now,
So
how many
that's what
siblings do you have?
I have two sisters,
Two
both
sisters,
younger. Yeah,
both younger. Okay,
yeah,
gotcha. And
yeah.
so you went back to Evergreen. Now, what was your degree in?
So my degree is a liberal arts degree. So
Okay.
it's a liberal arts college, but I changed my major at I changed my major toward the end to journalism.
Mm,
And I
okay.
did an internship. I did an internship at my local paper as a sports writer.
Mm-hmm.
Um, so and that's kind of like, and I actually like shortly after I graduated, I had an interview as a sport for as not as a sports reporter, but as a courtroom reporter. I had an interview lined up, but actually like the editor, because the editor knew me and like he had debated me when I was in high school and he had a high opinion of me. But he
Mm-hmm.
called me up. He's like, he had me scheduled for an interview. He was going to interview for the position. He's like, yeah, the guy I just interviewed is like, he has a master's degree from Northwestern. It's like, you're awesome, but like, I can't
Yeah.
hire this guy. He's just way
Yeah.
more qualified than you. And I'm
Right.
like, yeah, I
Yeah.
totally understand. So it's like, and then it's like, I met a woman who had a baby, ended up taking off to Nevada and
Hmm.
going right back into working as a cook.
Yeah. Okay. That's you did that
Yeah, yeah, that's
with
what I did.
her.
Yeah, with her. And it's like I never actually worked as a journalist, even after
Okay.
so I changed my and then it's like, and then once I started working as a cook again, it's like, ah, maybe I want to give this a fair shot. So
Yeah.
I stayed in, and that relationship didn't last. I have a daughter from that relationship. We never got married, never actually married. We had like a fake, fake wedding
Ceremony. Yeah.
ceremony for people who like, want to think that they want to get married but don't actually want to go. I actually wanted to get married. She was reluctant.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually one of the reasons that one of the ways she convinced me to move to Nevada was like, oh, it'd be so much easier to get married there. But then
Mm-hmm.
when we actually got there, like we never actually got married.
So you never like
And
legally got married.
she cheated me on me a bunch, and
Yeah.
like I'm like okay. So I insisted we move back to Washington,
Mm-hmm.
and because I thought maybe like if she's not hanging out in the casinos all the time, and she'd started drinking she wasn't drinking at all when we first got together,
Mm-hmm.
but she'd started drinking, and she clearly had a problem, like,
Yeah.
and she kept drinking, and the relationship fell apart. And
Or.
I have a daughter who I love, who's
Mm-hmm.
awesome out of that
Yeah.
relationship, Gloria. And but that but Yeah, that ended. But I worked as a cook until after my son was born. I got
Okay.
my second marriage. I got, not my second major relationship.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't marry the first one. Fake
Mm-hmm.
married.
Yeah.
My first real actual marriage. I got married in 1999 to my son's mother. He was
Okay.
born on 4th of July 2000. And it's like after my son was born, it's like I'm starting to have doubts because like the hours are so long, and I have to work every holiday. And
Mm-hmm.
it's like this is just a crappy job if
Yeah.
I have these young kids, and it's like I'm missing so much. So I transitioned. That's what made me transition into sales.
Okay. So
So
that wasn't.
I
What year did you
transitioned to
get married?
sales 1999. And
1999.
by 2003, I was working I stayed working as a chef until like sous chef. I was
Uh-huh.
working as a sous chef until 2003, and then 2003 I transitioned into sales.
How
And
did you go to sales? Like what happened for that to go down?
I just thought I had a skill set for it.
Yeah.
So it's like I'm like I just it's like I'm hey, I'm a good talker. I was a debater. It's like I know how to convince people of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
The problem with this
So it
story
can't
is
be that hard to convince people to buy stuff. If I mean I could convince somebody to like believe something that they're not
Mm-hmm.
inclined to believe,
Yeah.
then I can
Yeah.
sell them a product.
Sure.
So and I managed to get a job in sales and in technology sales. So that was kind of like, so it was, and then I quickly became a sales manager
Mm-hmm.
in technology sales. So it was like, it was cell phones, and then computers. And
So
I
what
did
made you
that
go into that space? Like you went and say, I want to do
as I,
sales, but here's this space I want to be in.
because I
What
was
made
a nerd and I love technology. And it's like,
Okay.
I figured I knew that like product knowledge was important to success in
Mm-hmm.
sales.
Yeah.
So it's like, this is the thing I know. So it's like, given like my particular skill set and the fact that I know this stuff,
So it
I
was
can I can
post.com
do this.
bust,
the
right?
problem with
Post
this story is he's been
Yeah, yeah.
talking for an hour and he hasn't even gotten to me yet.
We're getting to the best part.
This is my wife.
Hello. Hello, wife. um,
So
yeah,
yeah,
that's an interesting kind of shift there. A post.bomb bust. It was more hardware you were selling, or
I was selling at first. It was at first I was selling TVs
okay.
and consumer electronics. So
Uh-huh.
I sold like I was good at it too. Like I sold like more like big screen TVs than anybody in the district. Like
Was it a big box store, local store?
it was, yeah, it was the big box store. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
And you were selling TVs and like I
yeah.
think
And it was still
no,
commission in those days too, because it was before they killed all the those.
yeah.
There were still actually like decent paying commission jobs in that area,
Mm-hmm.
like back in the day. This is before like Circuit City purged all of its top selling people.
Yeah.
So, and I actually transitioned into cell phone sales before that.
Hmm.
So like I was in that industry when you could actually still make a decent living if you were good
Sure.
at it.
Yeah. Yeah.
So
Definitely. Yeah.
so
And when you know and you're interested or even passionate about a certain like technology, right? You're going to sell it because people will just feel it, right?
yeah,
You
right,
know,
exactly.
even
It's like
yeah,
yeah, I was able to just like, no, I can tell you why you need this. It's like,
yeah.
and it's also like you have to actually be able, you have to be a good listener too, right? Because
Hmm.
it's not like you can't just dump information at people. It's like you have to listen to what they're telling you and be able to like relate the information that you have to what they're telling you. So
Yeah.
there has to
Yeah.
be a linkage between their need and what you're offering. And then if you can make that linkage, and then if they trust you,
Yeah.
that's the other thing is they got to trust you. So you have to actually you have to be able to do small talk with them too. You got to be,
Yeah.
it's like,
That's just a sales course in itself right there, and it's still very relevant even. So I just got a new phone, and you know, I went to there's a local Verizon place by me, and I talked to a guy, and he was just on point, like, and but I wasn't ready to make a move, and then I wanted to get a phone again. I'm like, I'm going to do it. I skipped all the other stores to go see him, right? And he's telling me, oh, you do YouTube channels? Oh, cool. And here's this function here, right? And he ended up subscribing
yeah,
to my
that's
YouTube
exactly
channel,
it.
like, and then we talked about for 45 minutes about the role of technology in society right now. We talked about McLuhan, you know, the guy at the Verizon
Exact.
shop, you
But
know,
see,
she's
that's
like,
the thing
yeah,
though. But okay, I like having been a sales manager. It's like I know what qualities make for a good salesperson, and I'll tell you this: like, there's this stereotype of the salesperson. That stereotype salesperson, no one's buying anything from
nope,
him,
nope,
and if they do, they're going to end up returning it.
yep, yep,
Actually, successful salespeople are 100% of the time they are high empathy people that are
hmm,
able to relate.
and solve
Period.
problems.
And solve
Yep.
problems. Yeah,
Relate and solve
exactly.
problems. That's it.
Yep.
Yeah. I've been
Yep.
in sales, you know, kind of my whole life in kind of different mostly in healthcare sales. But you know,
Right.
if you know your product in your industry and you listen and you care and you solve a problem, that's what sales is. It's not about, you
Exactly.
know, trying to hoodwink somebody. You might make one say like, you know, and it's all about referrals and word of mouth and building a
Right.
network. And
Yes.
if
Yeah.
you know that they don't, you know, even sales classes that I've taken, they don't really get into that. They get into like value prop, you know, and you know, in rebuttals and all this like technical stuff. It's like, yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, yeah,
Most of the sales trainings are garbage.
yeah,
They're
100%.
mostly garbage. And like written by people who like, and they always think that they have it figured out too. They actually think that there's this technical formula. It's like
Hmm.
they have like, these like, you know, 12 habits of successful sales, people kind of BS. And it's like, it's almost all trash.
You can probably take a shitty salesman and make him a little bit less of a shitty salesman with those courses. That's
Right.
like the
Exactly.
ceiling, you
That's all
know?
you can do. You can't
Yeah,
actually make
definitely.
them good.
Yeah, no, for
Yeah.
sure. Now, when you're in that space, right, doing sales, what's your intellectual life like? What are you reading? What are you thinking about?
So one a lot technology. I'm reading a lot of technology and fiction. I'm so mostly technology and fiction. So and then less nonfiction in those days.
Mm-hmm.
Mostly novels, poetry. Um, uh, I've always written poetry.
Mm-hmm.
So novels and poetry and drama.
Okay.
I would read drama still because I did some playwriting in college.
Okay.
Um, and I write good dialogue.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Oh, so you're right
um,
too. Okay.
so, um, I, yeah, mostly that, and then lots and lots of like I had subscriptions to like every tech magazine, and of course, I'm like I would make like my daily rounds of like all the tech sites and stuff in
So when
those
you say
days.
technology, do you mean like philosophical reflections on technology or more like practical new
Product oriented,
innovations and
practical
stuff?
stuff
Yeah.
for my job.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah.
Yeah. Good deal. And how long did you do that for, the sales?
So 2003 to 2015. So for
Okay.
12 years.
Okay. Hold on. Let me
12
close the door
years.
here. My son's
Yeah,
playing his
no
music.
problem.
Hold on a second.
Hey,
All right. Yeah. Sorry about
yeah,
that.
no problem. So
Yeah.
yeah, so for like 12 years.
Okay. So 12 years.
Yeah.
And those 12 years, did you have any more kids?
No, I just have the two kids. I
You have
had
the two
my
kids.
my my daughter was born in '96 and my son was born in 2000.
In
and I have
2000?
like, yeah, I got remarried. I got remarried in 2018.
Okay. Oh, so recently.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
Awesome.
I got my second wife, like to say, we got divorced in like 2017.
Okay.
And she had like, it was, we had a she had a lot of health problems throughout our
Hmm.
marriage, and like, I was very overstretched because a lot of the sales management jobs that I was doing were very high hour work week.
Hmm. A lot of
And
pressure
then,
too. High pressure too, or
yeah,
no?
high
Yeah.
pressure. Yeah,
Yeah.
you've got to, yeah, you've got metrics to meet and all that kind of stuff. And and they're sending, like, not only is it like the overall sales volume, it's like they want you to have, like, when I was in cell phone sales, it's like you have to have a certain rate of data attachment and
Hmm.
secret shop scores and all this other kind of stuff too.
Okay.
Which actually,
Yeah.
I mean, actually, I actually had the highest data attachment rate uh, in my stores for our entire
Hmm.
company.
Okay.
So like I did pretty good like with those metrics, but it's still pressure to keep them up. Well,
Hmm.
actually, even there's actually even more pressure once you're on top, because it's like
Yeah,
you don't want
for
some other
sure.
store to knock you off, right?
Yeah, of
So it's
course.
like you want to, like, oh, we
Yeah.
gotta stay on top of this metric. So, but
Yeah.
yeah, so high pressure, a lot of hours, and then my wife was very very ill,
Hmm. Yeah.
and we didn't know what was causing her to be ill for a long time, and this went on for, she almost died she almost died from a pulmonary embolism, um uh uh in 2010. And she had she had weight loss surgery in what, 20 2013 or so.
Hmm.
And um like she I got sick. Then
Hmm.
I got sick, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, finally, it's like, after all this, I mean, probably just like my body's just breaking, and I'm not taking care of myself properly either, at all. And it's like, it's like my blood pressure is high. I'm not taking my medication properly. So um, I got very very ill in 2015, and like
Hmm.
while I was sick in the hospital, it's like she was hanging out with like this guy that used to work for me in the computer store that I managed, that I had to
Hmm.
fire.
Mm.
And like she started spending like all of her time
Yeah.
with this guy.
Yeah.
Like, and like we just like and she convinced me to let him move into our house.
Mm. Hmm.
And like, it was just like she was sending very clear signals that she was done with the relationship.
Hmm.
And oh, I skipped over the part where I converted to Catholicism in 1995. But
Yeah. Okay.
okay.
So yeah,
After
let's
being
go
at
back.
Thomas Aquinas College, like
Okay.
after coming back from Thomas Aquinas College, like I got on a path to convert to Catholicism, and by like Easter of '95, I was confirmed
So you're part of
in
the
the
Catholic
Catholic
Church,
Church.
just going regularly at that point?
So I was the worst Catholic convert ever. Like,
Yeah.
like here's my problem. Here's my problem is that just lack of spiritual guidance. Like, I didn't know how to be a Catholic.
Yeah.
Like, so it's like my uh, my godmother was a college professor of mine, and my godfather was my RCIA instructor. Like, people who I had no like extended, like, real long-term relationship with, and who I wouldn't really have any accountability to.
Yeah.
And it's like, it's like I was like, I, I think I went to mass like maybe half a dozen times after I
Hmm.
converted. And
Yeah.
like, yeah, like went from like convert who was excited to like lapsed Catholic in like no time.
Instantly,
My
right?
almost instantly. And then I got
Yeah.
but got married. My wife wasn't Catholic, so it's like,
What was
she,
she? Was she
she
interested
was
in anything
kind
at
of
all?
like vaguely, she was raised like she was raised in like a vaguely Christian home in like this sort of like politically conservative. We're more serious about the political conservatism than the evangelical Christianity kind of
Hmm.
household, right?
Was that your
So
politics too during that time, 95 to
yeah,
2005?
I was like my politics. I voted for Obama in 2008, but I voted Republican, straight Republican tickets
Hmm.
every election up until 2008.
Okay. Yeah.
So yeah, I was still conservative at that
Yeah.
time.
Okay.
And her family was very conservative too, and they liked me, and I liked them. And
Yeah.
anyway, so we were married by. We didn't have a Catholic wedding. Like we were married by a Pentecostal pastor who was actually like the the brother of my grandmother's best friend.
Hmm.
Like, and we started going to a Pentecostal church that was pastored by one of my best friends from high school.
Hmm.
And that's where we went with the kids. I got custody of my daughter
Hmm.
from my previous relationship, and we started going to that church together.
So did you go
And
pretty regularly after?
yeah, really regularly. We were
Okay.
regularly attendants of that church.
Okay.
Like we loved that church.
Community in the
Yeah,
church, good
yeah, we had
people.
it was a small church, and it was a bunch of Southern transplants, and I loved it. I think the music probably kept me in that church as much as anything because it was
Yeah.
like all the songs my mom sang growing up because it's all like
Hmm.
it's all a bunch of Southern transplants, so it's all this very traditional Southern gospel kind of music
Yeah. Okay.
in the church.
Okay.
And I there weren't a lot of kids, so like my son and my daughter got like a lot of attention, and
Hmm.
were very beloved by like all the congregation. And yeah, um at one point they decided to have me try to start a youth ministry, which is a terrible idea. I'm not the right. I'm so like it's like I'm articulate and energetic, but I'm way too intellectual.
Hmm.
I'm just
Yeah.
way too intellectual for
Sure. Yeah.
that role. That was just a
Yeah.
terrible idea. That didn't go very well.
Yeah.
And then we stayed in that church up until I moved. So we'd moved back. So we were living back in my hometown at that point because that's the store that I was managing
Hmm.
happened to be like in my hometown. So I was in Olympia and then moved back to my hometown to take over that store. But that store did really well. I like tripled the sales volume of what it had been previously. And because I did well in that store, they're like, hey, we'll give you this bigger store and you'll make more money. That ended up being a lie because the
Hmm.
overhead in my new store was really terrible and the location
Right.
wasn't very good. And it's like
Yeah.
I kind of like got hoodwinked in that. But
Hmm.
we moved to Olympia, and we never found a church in Olympia that we liked. And
Yeah. So,
my wife is having a lot of health problems. Her faith
yeah.
is wavering. I'm really stressed because I'm having to do everything,
Hmm.
like because it's like I'm the sole in because of her health. It's like I'm the sole income earner,
Hmm.
and all of the cooking and all of the cleaning and all of everything is like falling on me
Yeah.
because of her health condition.
So just a lot happening, right?
A lot happening, and it's like so like going to church is just like the furthest
Yeah.
thing from my mind at that point. I mean,
Okay. So
was
before we get into kind of now-ish, right? What was it like becoming a father?
amazing,
Yeah.
amazing. Like that, I I didn't like my first serious girlfriend who I ended up moving to Nevada with. Like not only was I not she had two kids already.
Hmm.
Not only was I not off put by that, like I was excited about that.
Hmm. Okay.
Like in fact, like my grandfather passed away when we were together, and I gave my grandfather's eulogy. And one of the things that I talked about in my grandfather's eulogy was about how like I considered those kids my own, and
Hmm.
I still very feel still very close to those girls. It's like because the relationship ended and they actually had a biological dad, I felt morally obligated to try to step back, you know, in their lives. But if either one of them were to call me up today
Hmm.
and needed something or it was in a bad way, I'd do whatever I could to help them out. Like I
Hmm.
still, you know,
Yeah.
so I meant what I said.
Yeah.
And then yeah, and yeah, I mean, it was like holding my daughter for the first time. This is like
Yeah.
There's nothing better than that.
All right. Yeah.
So yeah,
No.
yeah, I love it. That's why, and that's why I mean, that's ultimately like because I love being a parent so much is why I left. That's why I quit the job that I loved,
Mm-hmm.
And I still, it's like, I mean, I didn't quit it altogether because like I still do like, but I moved it to a part of my life that I have more control over because I still do catering.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
I still do catering, on occasions, more
Okay.
actively, obviously, pre-COVID.
Yeah. Yeah,
I
for
mean,
sure.
it's kind of hard to COVID made the catering
Yeah.
kind of dry up a little bit, so I kind of
Yeah.
pulled back. I actually let my business license lapse, and
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
So,
So
so 2015, 2018, you got a new relationship, you get married again. And then how did
we
you,
were together for 3 years before we got married, though.
before you
It
got
was like,
married?
yeah.
Yeah.
So it's like,
Yeah.
yeah. So we were together for since 2015. We got married in 2018.
Okay.
I was a
And then
little
you,
bit reluctant to get married again.
yeah. Yeah,
So,
of course. Right.
and I was reluctant to get divorced too, because it's like,
Yeah.
even though it's like, I wasn't a practicing Catholic, it's like I still am Catholic, like in
Yeah.
my beliefs. Like my theology is Catholic. Like I am Catholic. Like I'm a terrible Catholic, and I'm like, and now I'm a divorced Catholic, but my belief is still Catholic. It's like,
So does the Catholic Church not allow divorce? Is that a big no-no in the Catholic Church?
so yeah, there's like you can get, and I mean, because because my marriage ended because of um infidelity on my wife's part, I could probably get an annulment.
Yeah.
But it's a lot of paperwork and it's $500 and it's like
So it
it's
allows.
like,
So in terms
you
of the
know,
religion, I know Orthodoxy allows for situations. I think divorce 3 times. I think
yeah,
it is. Is that the same in the Catholic
Orthodoxy
Church?
is far more lenient on, or Orthodoxy is far more lenient on divorce than, and
Yeah.
I was very attracted to Orthodoxy. It's like I
Yeah.
was like, for me it was a coin flip.
Mm-hmm.
Like it was literally down to a coin flip between Orthodoxy and Catholicism.
Was that
And
in
the reason,
'95 when you were
and that back
contracted?
in 95 when I
Okay.
was first converting, it's like I knew I couldn't
Yeah.
be a Protestant because I like went and got the smartest Protestants that I knew. And it's like I went pillar by pillar of the Reformation. I'm like, defend this,
Right.
defend this,
Yeah.
defend this. And none of them could. None of
Yeah.
them could. None of them could.
Yeah.
And
Definitely.
I picked the smartest, like best equipped, like my high school debate coach was a very, very bright Methodist
Mm-hmm.
minister who was a skilled debater. And
Mm-hmm.
like he was like the go-to person I went to. Like if anybody is going to be able to defend this, it's going to be him. And he's
Yeah.
like,
Right.
he's like,
It's
he's
not
like,
going to happen. Right.
yeah, and it just,
Yeah.
yeah, it didn't happen. So it's like, but there was definitely some areas where I lean more toward the Orthodox position.
Mm-hmm.
And it's like, and I actually like, I thought the Orthodox liturgy was like hands down
Yeah.
better.
Yeah.
Hands down, like no,
Mm-hmm.
like this is not a contest. If there had been a Byzantine church anywhere near me, that would have been like the perfect
Right. Yeah.
the perfect
not,
compromise, right?
not too many of those around.
Right,
Right.
but
Yeah.
but there wasn't. So and the nearest, at that time I was still where I was living at the time, I was still living in Aberdeen, and the nearest Orthodox church was 90 minutes away
Mm-hmm.
in
Yeah.
Tacoma,
Okay.
and there was a Catholic church 5 blocks away.
Mm-hmm.
So it's
Was it
like,
like a kind of older school Catholic church, beautiful architecture, or is it
no,
more kind of
very
modern?
modern,
Yeah.
very modern, like built in like probably the late 60s or the early 70s.
Yeah. Okay.
Post Vatican II,
Mm-hmm.
modern looking Catholic church.
Okay.
Yeah.
So now, so how did you find Shari, right? And where did you, let's take us up to maybe what 2008, 16, 18. How did you get into this circle of this little weird part of the internet that we're both part of?
Okay. So as my marriage was falling apart, my faith was also deconstructing.
Okay.
So, okay. So it's like, and I'm like back into my, like, what is faith? I don't know what faith is. I think I'm probably an agnostic if I'm being totally honest with myself. And then I discovered Jordan Peterson and David Bentley
Wow.
Hart at the same time.
Hmm.
So it's like Jordan, like the Jordan Peterson's like definition of faith was hugely critical for me to be able to piece my faith back together. Like
Yeah.
I, hugely. Like I couldn't have done it without that. I'm like, oh, okay. Now
So
I
you
get it.
finally found that intellectual. Finally, your entire life, you found that intellectual that could frame it. And I'm very
Right. To
resonate with
family, it's
this.
like, yeah, that allowed me to trust what was my deep inner instinct all along.
Yeah. Wow.
Right. And to not think that I had to have like something that was like inassailable and could never be challenged by anyone's counter arguments ever. It's like I thought that I basically had to construct a perfect debate case,
Mm-hmm.
right, to defend my faith. That's really what I thought. That's
Yeah.
really what I thought. I had to like the perfect legal argument
Yeah.
that could not be destroyed by anything. Where I was completely internally consistent and was unassailable by any possible form of counter argument and could never fail and had a rational answer for every single possible objection. That's what I thought I
Yeah.
needed. That's
Yeah.
what I thought I needed.
So you were trying to
And
build the most complete ideal you could come up with, right? The most
yeah,
complete
right.
ideal without taking that leap of the mystery, right?
Right.
There's no
Yes,
room for
exactly. In
mystery,
fact,
right?
I
Yeah.
despise. I read Kierkegaard in high school, and that's like, oh my god, I can't. I hated him.
Oh,
I'm like,
really?
you got
Yeah.
to be kidding me. It's like
Leap of faith, night of faith,
nothing. It's nothing seemed more possible, more idiotic to me
Yeah.
than that. It's
Yeah.
like, I was like, I told, yeah. So yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah,
So
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 that
take
was huge, and then I'm reading David Bentley Hart at the same time. So I'm getting this, and then I'm getting this really nice framework, like this really robust intellectual framework from David Bentley Hart. It's very sad to me that David Bentley Hart doesn't like Jordan Peterson because for me, like both of them together played such an important role for me to like rebuild my faith.
Why doesn't he like
Um,
him? I'm not aware of that.
it really, he doesn't like Jung for
Hmm.
starters. So it's not all politics. It's not all
Yeah.
politics, but I think it's mostly politics.
Yeah.
So it's mostly politics, and then also he really does have a very genuinely low opinion of Jung.
Yeah.
Like he does. So that's it.
Maybe a
And
little
then
mimetic rivalry happening there too. A little
yes, I
you know.
do think it is. Yeah, I do think it is. I mean, I do think it's a little bit of petty jealousy on David Bentley
Hmm.
Hart's part because Jordan Peterson's star got so big, and it's like, I mean, it's like it's only human. I'm not trying to
Yeah.
judge David Bentley Hart
100%.
for that. It's like, it's like if I were as smart and accomplished and intellectual as David Bentley Hart, and I got this, and I saw someone like having this meteoric rise, who, from my point of view, was like far less accomplished as an intellectual,
Yep.
I'd probably be a little,
Of course.
salty about it too. Like
Yeah.
I would. I'm like,
Likewise.
yeah, I'm human. It's like,
Likewise. 100%.
and then the last piece of the puzzle for me, as I'm like kind of making this reassembly, is so I didn't read Barfield directly first. I read Mark Vernon's book, Secret History of Christianity,
Hmm.
and like discovered that Barfield existed through Mark Vernon's book. And then
Okay.
I started reading Barfield, and it's like, oh, it's like once it's like one once I'm able to grasp imagination as a truth bearing faculty, it's like, oh, I'm just there.
So I've never
All the
read
way there
Barfield.
because I okay. So Barfield is an evolution of consciousness thinker.
Hmm.
And like the piece of Barfield that was important to me is that Barfield like follows Coleridge in arguing that imagination, like proper imagination, not just fancy, right?
Hmm.
But proper imagination is actually a truth bearing faculty. And as I've said,
Imagination.
I've always written poetry, and like poetic language is kind of a major emphasis of Barfield's thought. So that
Hmm.
immediately resonated with me. And it's like, oh, okay. It's like I now feel like I am able to now just fully trust this
So
and lean
so
into this.
imagination is a truth bearing faculty, right? So how does that resonate with Peterson's work? With
With
he's got a
Peterson,
young influence, the collective unconscious.
have you
Is the
so
truth?
the
Yeah.
most Barfieldian thing Peterson has ever written is actually like the 8th chapter of his new book that just came out.
Okay.
If you look at that, where he's talking about like the need to create a beautiful space,
Hmm.
right? And he actually like, what he's talking about is like aesthetic vision.
Hmm.
That's what he's talking about. That's what it
Okay.
is. It's like that it's that sense of like seeing the transcendent beauty in things is something that you can trust,
Mm-hmm.
that it's real, that what we do, and if everyone, and if people are honest about what their primary, like, had I been honest of my primary experience back in that Ukrainian Orthodox Church back in 1989, if I had been honest about what my primary experience was from that and not tried to rationalize it away,
Mm-hmm.
I would have been converted right then.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
All I needed to ever do was to just trust that experience
Yeah.
and not try to use my abstract reasoning after the fact to reason it away. That's what Barfield's talking about.
Okay. Yeah, and that's funny. That makes sense, really, in terms of the book, The Hierarchy of Heaven and Earth, right? How he talks about we're at a place now where we've attenuated from the beautiful, the beatific vision, through the humanist period, the good, right? And now we're just hyper focused on the true in terms of truth as correctness. And he talks about reversing that, right? And opening back up, towards the beautiful, right? And there's this book, The Ethics of Beauty by Tim Petitsis. Beauty will save the world, right? In a sense. And it's interesting that happened at the same time while you were thinking and reading Peterson. So that's interesting. Very interesting.
Yeah, and it's like I go back and read like I go back and read like some of my older poems, like from like when I was still like, self-identifying as an agnostic, and it's like, oh, like God's still there.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like when I was in that mind space, when I was trusting my like imaginative poetic intuition, when I was trusting my natural sense of beauty, God's there. He resonates all through all those poems. Like they have dark elements too. There's like doubt and darkness and and shadow. But then even in those darkest of the poems, you can see like there's a fundamental faith like shining through in them.
Yeah,
that I wasn't able to even see. I wasn't able to see when I wrote them, but with this new like reassembled toolkit, going back and look at them, I'm like, oh,
yeah,
I never didn't believe.
Right.
Which is I actually had like when I was at Thomas Aquinas College and I was still identifying as an agnostic, I had this old Jesuit priest on campus. Like this is like the thing that got me like on a reading binge that led me on my path to becoming Catholic. Like he looked at me. It was like kind of an honor to get to go and have dinner with the priests on campus at Thomas Aquinas College, because they had the best cigars and the best booze and they served really good food. So everybody wanted to get their name drawn to go.
Yeah.
And when my turn came up, Father Steckler, when I'm introduced to him, he looks at me and he shakes my hand, he smiles at me and he says, "Oh yes." He says, "Nathan, you're the one who thinks he's an agnostic."
So that stuck with you, huh?
And I smiled and laughed, but I was kind of secretly mad.
Yeah.
And then it's like, what does he mean? And it kept like playing over and over again as a refrain in my head. And then it's like, so I got a big stack of books from the library and like, I read a bunch of Chesterton and Lewis and it's like, okay.
Yeah. So they brought you Chesterton, Lewis, Barfield, Peterson, right? Kind of brought you into this space where you're at now, you'd say?
Well, the Chesterton and Lewis was more like the earlier, like the first conversion that was really still based in a rational argument. I just got better arguments in my toolkit. So I was able to knock down more challenges, but it was still kind of rationally dependent. Which is why I think it didn't stay. That's why I didn't have that missing piece. I didn't get those missing pieces I got primarily from Peterson's definition of faith. Is that what you act out? Like, right?
Yeah.
What are you doing with your body? What does your body tell you what you believe?
Yeah.
What does your behavior tell you what you believe? Right.
Yeah.
Because that's going to be way deeper than whatever abstractions you think. I mean, we hold contradictory abstractions in our head all the time.
Absolutely.
That's called being human, right?
That's why I think, people.
And then Barfield like give me the confidence to like trust that like aesthetic like imagination that believes it is seeing a glimpse of transcendent beauty. Like why doubt that? Like what do you think you're acting? I mean, it's like you act the only way that when you listen to a really beautiful piece of music, you know, or you see something really beautiful in nature, you have to talk yourself out of thinking that's what happened.
Mm-hmm.
In
Yeah.
the moment when it happens, that's how you experience it.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
why not trust it? Like,
Mm-hmm.
what is
Where does that trust come from?
where does that trust come from? I
Yeah.
think I don't. So I'm trying to talk in Barfield language a little bit here. I don't think I don't think Barfield talks is an evolution of consciousness thinker, and I don't think that original participation like
Mm-hmm.
ever fully went away. So like there was a time there was a time there was a time before we entered this sort of like abstract withdrawn kind of consciousness that's kind of happens like really post Descartes, right?
Mm-hmm.
Before that, if you go back and like seriously try to think about like what classical and medieval thinkers were thinking, like were really thinking, like they didn't see the world the same way that we do. They still saw the world as actually participating in God.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And so and we lost that sense of participation,
Mm-hmm.
but not fully. But
Yeah.
not fully, because it was only our abstractions that caused us to lose it.
Mm-hmm.
We started rationalizing it away. So like Barfield says the way that the movement toward to regain participation, he says there's no way, basically says there's no way back to original participation.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's a phase we pass through, and that
Mm-hmm.
what we have to do now is that we have to like consciously choose to re-enter participation through final participation. And that's just a very, very like thumbnail sketch
Yeah.
of Barfield, but that's it.
Yeah. But by consciously, not rationally, right? Or
Correct.
rationally is part of it.
Consciously.
Yeah.
Not really. No, you mean consciously. It's more about awareness. It's more like
Yeah.
it's actually. I think so. So Harding, if you like Harding, you will like Barfield, because to me, what Harding is doing is he's kind of like taking, like Barfield is trying to present something. He's trying to present something in an intellectual way, so to try to break people out of their rationalist mindset, right?
Mm-hmm.
And then Harding just is like Harding just takes that and tries to apply it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So what Harding is actually doing is trying to take that Barfieldian insight about participation and turning into something you can do.
Mm-hmm.
He's showing you how to do it. He's like trying to teach you how to see, how to participate, how to be connected to the hierarchy below and the hierarchy above.
Yeah. Yeah, there's this
So,
quote that kind of came up from this quote from, I think it's McLuhan actually, that faith is a mode of perception. Faith is a mode of perception. It's not and it reminds me of Peterson's, he says, I act as if God exists, which is
right.
like, which people give him crap for that. It's like, oh, you're being disingenuous. Well, there's something, it's more than belief. There's more than belief happening there. There's a higher, like, so him saying that, I was talking with someone I had an interview with, and he said that, Peterson is like a John the Baptist figure.
Right.
And that, he's fighting so hard to hold on to Jung and his rationalist view that like he's, you see the Holy Spirit working through him in the most painfully beautiful way. And people are seeing that. And so many people wouldn't be drawn to him and back towards Christian faith if he was just like, oh, I believe in God. Like at the very, you know what I'm saying? People say, oh, he would just convert if he'd convert. It's like, no, what he's doing is very important, in the way he's doing it. I don't think consciously.
I completely agree.
Sucking people in.
It's actually way more valuable than if you were to just say, I mean, if you were to just kind of like, weigh probabilities and say, okay, I'm gonna confess this confessional propositional thing because I think it's the most probable thing, and that's the scientifically responsible thing to do, the rationally responsible thing to do. That would be way less powerful.
Yeah,
that would be way less powerful, and it would be way less honest. I would say the only thing that I would say to him, and he personally helped me so much. The only thing I would say to him, if I had his ear, is just fully act it out, right? And enter into the contemplative life. That's how
I've read Nietzsche and I've read Jung, and they war with me in my head.
He would pray. Just pray. Pray.
Yeah.
That's the answer is prayer. It's like,
100%.
That's it. I mean, that is really 100% the answer. And that's like the time tested answer too. It's
Yep.
like, and across traditions, actually, like, it's
100%.
like, it's always been start doing the contemplative practice
Yeah.
and the
Just,
rest will come.
yeah. My son and I, we pray the saints prayers every morning and every night. We're about to go kind of do it here in a minute.
Absolutely.
And I have about 5 prayer books. They're Orthodox prayer for young adults. And him and I were going to give it to whoever presents itself the opportunity to give it to. Like, we're not going to get it and just give it to people at all. We've had them for a month now. We've given one out to the neighbor, and he's kind of telling me who we should give it to at the particular time. So, I guess we can leave it here, and I'd love to continue the conversation another
Absolutely.
time, kind of from this point on. But prayer has been such a profound impact in my life in the last year and a half that I try to not tell people it, but just kind of show them and then give them some resources to try it out. And I say, just try it out.
Since I've started a practice of daily prayer, like, it is like nothing has made a bigger impact. Like,
yeah,
I am like, everything in my life is better.
Yep, me too.
Because of taking that step. So
the qualities of relationships change.
That's the perfect note. And it's like, if you think you don't have faith, pray for it.
Yeah, and you'll get it.
And you'll get it. You really will.
Every time.
Every time. Yeah.
Every time. And it might not look like what you want it to look like or think it will.
Exactly.
Oh, here are the books right here. These little books, they're $5. It says "Hear Me" on there, and it's the prayer of the saints, Orthodox saints. It's got the was it St. Patrick's breast prayer? You familiar with that? He knows it by heart. He knows it by heart.
That's great.
It's a morning prayer. It says, how does it go, Carter? How does that prayer go?
Read it.
The first part of it. Arise this morning through God's strength to pilot me, God's wisdom to uphold me. That's long. So yeah, I guess we can end it there. It's a good note to end it.
It's a great note to end it. Hey, James, it was good getting to know you more.
Yeah, likewise. I loved your story. I found it fascinating. I could talk for another hour, to tell you the truth, and just dig in more. But let's do it again. And
all right.
I'm excited to see Shari and then talk about the book more next time too.
Excellent. All right, James.
All right, sir. Thanks, Nate. Appreciate you, man. Have a good one. Good night.